If you don't trust those things, you're going to be lessening craving and attachments. And you're going to be able to weaken the hindrances. You're going to make the attainment of deep meditation more possible. You're going to be able to get into jhanas. And then you're going to be able to really strengthen the real view, the right view, because you've got nothing to prove. In particular, the avijja is not just about being deluded about the nature of beings in this world, not just being deluded about the body. It's also being deluded about the mind and how it works. The Buddha talked about 5 khandhas, and only one of those khandhas is the body. There's 4 khandhas: perception, Vedana first of all, and then perception, and then mental formations, consciousness. And that's very important, to get into those and to see that those are also not me, not mine, not a self. That they are also impermanent, they rise and fall. And also they are conducive, or they are suffering, dukkha. It's important to see that. But of course we don't want to see that. Who wants to see that this body and this mind is anicca? We want to continue on. Sort of really stupid people think they can continue on in this body for 80, 90, 100, 120 years, 150 years, keep on going long, long, long. Why would you want to do that anyway? One of the moving stories in my youth, there was a movie which I went to watch. It was Dracula. But this movie was called The Thinking Man's Dracula. It had a message to it. Dracula was immortal. The only way he could possibly die was to be caught out in the sun's rays. If he only went out at night and hid during the day, he would last forever. And this whole movie was based on the struggle within this character Dracula, between being so bored of life but so afraid of death. After 300 or 400 years, he'd done everything, been everywhere, experienced everything there was to experience, and he was bored out of his fangs. I was going to say skull. And eventually, there was nothing else to do. He allowed himself to get drawn out into the early sun's rays, to die. People who want to live long, 200, 300, 400, what do you want to do that for? Even 40, 50, 60 years, many people are already bored, stiff, got nothing else to do. But sometimes people think they want this body to go on forever. It's complete delusion. They just want to be. Some people want this mind to go on forever. What do you want this mind to go on forever for? What are you going to experience with the mind anyway? Experience happiness now, suffering later on. There's no way that a mind can just experience happiness, 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 happiness. As I said so often sitting here, that happiness is just the gap, the pause between 2 moments of suffering. Suffering is a pause between 2 moments of happiness. Happiness is conditioned by the suffering which went before it. Suffering is conditioned by the happiness which went before it. If you lose happiness which was very wonderful and beautiful, then that's suffering. If terrible suffering finishes, that's happiness. So the mind cannot just experience happiness all the time. It's impossible. Any reasonable person can see that. It will only experience happiness and suffering. Nor can it experience just in between, nothingness, neither happiness nor suffering. That's like a dead log, doesn't experience anything. No change means death, means finished, gone. It's not being anymore. It's as if it's just a rock, just nothing, no meaning. So why would we want this to keep on going? The reason is because there's something deep inside of us, the craving to be, bhava tanha, which bends our perceptions and thoughts and views to try and give some little place somewhere in samsara. Even if I know that the big ego is not going to be there, at least the refined ego or the cosmic ego or the underlying ground of being or whatever else you call it, just people just struggle, they just want somewhere, some little place where I can be, something of me left afterwards. That's bhava tanha, and that bends everything. This is called delusion. This is how delusion works. And why would people want that to keep on going? When we look upon anicca, we've got to see it completely. The same as when we look upon dukkha. We're in denial about suffering. Isn't this a wonderful world, wonderful people, a wonderful monastery? It's very hard, shameful even, to admit that this monastery, this body, is just a mass of suffering. People don't want to admit that. Psychology, it's denial. It's like looking at those two dogs copulating. We just don't want to see that. No one wants to see suffering. Suffering by its very nature is repellent. It pushes you away. However, that if one has the courage, which is born of having been in deep samadhi, you don't have any desire or aversion to what you see, and you look upon this body, you will just see just how it is completely unreliable. That happiness and suffering in this body just dance around each other like two inseparable lovers. You cannot part them. And you just realize that this body with its five senses is just an irritation. And if only you can let go of this body and the five senses, you go to the bliss of the jhanas, and that's far more beautiful. You see everything in the five senses as dukkha. Not only that, you should be able to see that everything in the mind is dukkha. If the citta is there, there is dukkha. So why would a person want to actually to keep anything of the five khandhas? It only is because of denial, because we haven't seen dukkha completely. In the Dhammacakka Sutta, which we just chanted, the Buddha said that we should contemplate dukkha until we see it absolutely completely. Parinyata bhang, fully knowing it. We can only do this to see what we don't want to see, when we don't have any wants. After a jhana, the mind is that strong, it can go in to the five aggregates, can see them without any resistance. Once the five hindrances are there, you can contemplate any of those five aggregates, and there will be a resistance. No, I don't want to see this. This can't be right. This can't be true. The likes and dislikes, the attachments, are stopping you seeing the truth. After jhana, no likes and dislikes are there for a small time. You can go right in to the body. You just see it, there's nothing there worthy of celebrating, worthy of keeping. You can go right into the five senses. Even in their most beautiful, wonderful form, they're just suffering, not worth anything. You go into thoughts and see just all these thoughts are just so much just stupid waves on the beautiful, peaceful lake of the mind. Not worth anything. Just so much empty talk. You can look upon Vedana, just see it as happiness, suffering, coming and going. Can't have one without the other. You look at perceptions and just see just why the mind chooses one thing and rejects another. This is what perception is, of all the things which you can see and all the ways which you can see it. Why is it you always perceive it in one way? Why do you perceive it in that way? The reason is because that's what you want to perceive. And sankharas, their thoughts as well, will. Where does this will, where does it come from? It's frightening, so people tell me, to say that the will isn't you. It's completely conditioned, that you are not in charge. There's not a person inside you at the switchboard deciding what to do. It's frightening because it gets at something we don't want to give up. Our sense of being, our sense of me and self. We look at consciousness, the mind, and go deep inside of that. And see that mind. See it completely, fully. And understand that that too, that which knows, is not me. It rises and falls. That's a hard one to see. People don't like to see it. As the Buddha said in the Nidana Samyutta, number 61, people can pretty easily give up the attachment to their bodies. The people who give up the attachment to the citta are very few. People can see the citta as something which arises and passes away, which is not substantial, which is empty. They are few. They are Aryans. 61 Sutta of the Nidana Samyutta. We don't want to see that. But you get into a jhana. You come out of that jhana. And then you will have no predilection to any view. You have no likes and dislikes at that time. You'll be able to take a look at that and check it out for yourself and see. Once you have that freedom gained from the jhanas, not only can you investigate deeply, but you can hold that investigation for long enough to bore right into the subject. Another reason why avijja, delusion, continues to mask the truth, continues to blind us, is that very often whatever we focus on as a subject of insight is moving too fast. We cannot really see it clearly, because as it moves, we move with it. The mind is just too restless. Sometimes insight is like trying to hit a moving target, which is going at 1,000 miles a second. That's called the mind. The mind just moves so fast. First of all, when that mind is very still after a jhana, and attention can hold its focus on that mind for hours and hours and hours, then you can bore into that. Sometimes it takes a long time to get to know something. I've given a simile before of holding up an object, and you've heard me do that simile before, holding up an object and asking you, what is it? And I do that because it brings out the way our mind works. We give it a name, and then I say, what else is it? We give it another name. I say, what else is it? We give it another name. And as we keep on looking, we soon get beyond the old labels. We exhaust the labels. All those labels, like views and perceptions, thoughts which we've learned, they're old stuff. Having exhausted all the labels, then we can actually start to see the nature of this thing. We bore further and further into it. And to see it as if we're seeing it for the first time.